Tell us what inspired you want to write this book, Stolen Focus.
Well, I noticed that with each year that passed, things that require deep focus, like reading a book, were for me getting harder and harder. It was getting more and more like running up a down escalator. You know what I mean? Like I could do it, but it was getting harder. And I was really uncomfortable with what was happening. And I was really uncomfortable with the fact that this seemed to be happening to everyone around me. And particularly the young people in my life, a lot of them seem to be almost whirring at the speed of Snapchat, right? Where nothing's still or serious. I'm really curious about talking about your kids in this respect, because a lot of the book is about kids. And I want to figure out, well, is something unusual happening to our attention? And if so, what? And what can we do about it? So I used my training in the social sciences at Cambridge University to travel all over the world, from Miami to Melbourne to Moscow, to interview over 200 of the leading experts on focus and attention, and just really deeply dig into their science to figure out what's going on here. And I learned that there's scientific evidence for 12 factors that can make your attention better or can make it worse. And loads of the factors that can make your attention worse have been hugely rising in recent years. We are in a real and massive attention crisis, I reached the conclusion. Just think about some simple facts. For every one child who was diagnosed with attention problems when I was 7, and I think we're pretty much the same age, there's now 100 children given that diagnosis. And that's because they're identifying a real problem. The average American office worker now focuses on any one task for only 65 seconds. So for only 3 minutes. For college students, it's 65 seconds. So we're facing a real problem here. And I think what people need to understand is if you're struggling to focus and pay attention, as almost all of us are, your attention didn't collapse. Your attention has been stolen from you by some very big forces. And once you understand what's really happening to us, it opens up a different set of solutions that we can all achieve together.
And what is that? Who has stolen it away from you?
So there's a huge range of factors, and I'll give you one example. Right, you've got a phone here, and you might get some messages on it. I assume it's about the show, right? So I went to interview one of the leading neuroscientists in the world, a guy named Professor Earl Miller, who's at MIT, and he said to me, "There's one thing you've got to understand about the human brain more than anything else. You can only consciously think about one or two things at a time. That's it. This is a fundamental limitation of the human brain. The human brain hasn't changed in 40,000 years significantly. It ain't going to change on any time scale any of us are going to see. You can only think about one or two things at a time." But we've fallen for a massive delusion. The average teenager now believes they can follow 6 or 7 forms of media at the same time. But what happens is scientists get people into labs and they say, okay, do loads of things at the same time, and they monitor them. And what they discover is you can't do more than one thing at a time. What you do is you juggle very quickly between them. You go from, wait, what was that Facebook message? What did Patrick just ask me? What's this on WhatsApp? What's on the TV over there? You juggle, you juggle, you juggle. And it turns out that comes with a huge cost. The kind of fancy name for it is the switch cost effect. When you switch between tasks, you think you're doing lots of things at the same time. So you're talking to me, you're looking at your phone, you're looking at the screen. It turns out you will do everything you're trying to do less competently. You make more mistakes, you remember less of what you experience, you're far less creative. And this sounds like a small effect. When you first hear about it, you're like, yeah, I get that, but that's quite small. It was shocking talking to the scientists to realize what a big effect this is. So I'll give you an example of a pretty long scientific study that's backed by a wider amount of evidence. Hewlett-Packard, you know the printer company? Who, even the words paper jam make my whole body fucking tense up. But anyway, Hewlett-Packard, the printer company, got a scientist in to do some research on this. And he split their workers into 2 groups. And the first group was told, just get on with whatever your task is and you're not going to be interrupted. And the second group was told, get on with your task, but you're going to have to answer a heavy load of email and phone calls. So pretty much how you, me, how we all live most of the time, right? And at the end of it, they gave an IQ test to both groups. What they discovered is the group that had not been interrupted scored 10 IQ points higher than the group that had. To give you a sense of how big that is, if the 3 of us sat down now and smoked a fat spliff together and got stoned, our IQs would go down by 5 points. So being interrupted all the time in the way that we are is twice as bad for your intelligence as getting stoned. You'd be better off sitting at your desk, getting stoned and doing one thing at a time than you would sitting at your desk, being constantly interrupted and not getting stoned. To be clear, you'd be better off neither getting stoned nor being interrupted, obviously. This is a huge effect. If you're interrupted, it takes, on average, 23 minutes to get back to the level of focus that you had before you were interrupted. But most of us never get 23 minutes spare. So we're constantly operating at this diminished level of brain power. A different study found just getting 8 text messages an hour, that doesn't sound like much to me, don't know if it does to you, that diminishes your ability to remember what you're experiencing and to answer questions about it by 30%. This is why Professor Miller said we are living at the moment in a perfect storm of cognitive degradation as a result of all these interruptions.
So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did, here's another short segment to watch. Or if you want to see the entire podcast, click over here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.